My cousin Julia, 27 years old, married my former boyfriend, a tyrant, Louis, 29 years old, and poured dirt on me in her wedding speech, and then tried to break into my house at night. My cousin Julia began dating my ex boyfriend Louis 2 years ago. I, 27 years old, was in a relationship with Louis for 3 years. We started dating after he graduated from university, and I was in my second year of college. We broke up a couple of weeks after my 20th birthday. Honestly speaking, the relationship was not the best, and I very much regret that it was with this person that I had my first adult relationship. We seemed like an ideal couple from the outside, but in reality, everything was different. He was a very insecure and controlling person and forbade me many things, going to bars with friends or communicating with male friends. He constantly monitored me, and if I didn't do what he wanted, he began to manipulate and gaslight me, convincing me that I was to blame for the relationship not going well. I was very afraid of losing him and did everything possible so that Lewis wouldn't leave me, but this still turned out to be insufficient for him to stay. In the end, he dumped me, declaring that nothing was working out for us, and then blocked me so I couldn't contact him. I tried very hard to establish contact with him, but after the breakup, he completely disappeared. And 2 months later, I learned from acquaintances that he already had a new girlfriend, so it was an absolute waste of my time. After the breakup, we didn't communicate for a long time, but then when I turned 25, he finally unblocked me and wrote, "Congratulations on your birthday." I didn't respond to him and thought it was strange that he was writing to me at all, since by that time I already had a boyfriend. But he continued to write to me despite my silence, and in the end, I had to block him. After that, we didn't communicate again for several months. However, just a few months after my birthday, Julia invited me to her house. When I arrived, she said she wanted to introduce me to her boyfriend, and it turned out to be Louis. It turned out that he wrote to me on my birthday precisely because he wanted to improve relations with me before this. They met at work, started dating, and were very seriously intentioned. Julia and I were very close since childhood, so for me, this was a real shock. She perfectly knew how badly we broke up and how toxic he was toward me, so I was completely stunned upon learning that they were now together. She said she understood my discomfort, but asked me to give him a chance. I really wanted to try to accept this news, but for me, it was too much. I wanted to be happy for Julia, but Lewis was a person who caused me a lot of pain in the past. These were my first serious relationships. In middle and high school, I only had crushes. He thoroughly ruined my life, so I felt enormous resentment toward him for his behavior. I tried to explain to Julia as tactfully as possible that although I wished her happiness, I couldn't accept that she was now with Lewis and didn't want to be part of her life anymore. She was very upset and tried to talk to me several times, but I couldn't come to terms with it because she better than anyone knew how toxic he was with me and how deeply he traumatized me. But she still continued to date him, claiming that he had changed and was now better. I didn't believe this. She could freely build a relationship with him. I had no problems with that, but I also had the right to exclude him and, along with him, her from my life. For me, this was simple. Of course, it was hard for me because with Julia, we were not just cousins, but also very good friends. However, for my own peace of mind, I had to make this decision. After she announced that she started dating Lewis, I almost stopped communicating with her. The last 2 years, we were cold toward each other. When she realized I wasn't going to talk to her, she herself began to act aloof, and I don't blame her for that. We met at family events and simply ignored each other, although before we always stuck together and gossiped about everyone. Now everything changed, and honestly, it suited me. Everyone has their own life, and everyone is free to act as they want. I had no complaints against Julia. I just didn't want to talk to her anymore. That's all. But apparently, she took it close to her heart and wanted to take revenge on me. She began to spread all sorts of nasty rumors about me among our relatives, trying to ruin my reputation. I considered this completely unnecessary because I would never have done that to her, never even despite our relationship. Over the last year, she told them that I was the reason for the breakup with Lewis and that I supposedly had no moral principles. Together with Lewis, they spread rumors that I flirted with other guys right in front of him, and that was supposedly the true reason for his jealousy and desire to control me. They presented it as if I was a flirty woman, because of whom he became insecure, although in reality it was exactly the opposite. It was he who allowed himself to flirt excessively with other girls, and expected me to calmly accept it, while he himself didn't like that I had male friends with whom I simply communicated. He constantly manipulated and gaslighted me, forcing me to gradually abandon communication with everyone who was dear to me. It hurt me that they tried to smear me in front of my own family, but if I'm honest, I was too busy with my life to seriously worry about it. Moreover, nobody seriously believed them, so I decided not to react. I knew that my reaction was exactly what they were seeking, and therefore I consciously didn't succumb to provocations. Besides, I perfectly understood that if I wanted, I could easily stop all this. It would have been enough to talk to my Aunt Linda, who would quickly put things in order. Despite the fact that I was no longer close with Julia, I maintained very good relations with her mother. My Aunt Linda is a federal judge, and I was sure she would act correctly. She is my father's older sister, and everyone knows she has an iron character, and would never do anything dishonest or wrong. I don't understand how Julia could grow up like that, given who her mother is. One conversation with my Aunt Linda would have been enough to stop this whole circus, but I also understood that it would greatly harm Julia herself, as she was quite dependent on her mother financially. Recently, she launched her own jewelry line, but as far as I heard, things weren't going particularly well. In any case, I didn't want to bother Aunt Linda with such trifles, and was sure I could handle everything myself, so I didn't tell her anything. Besides, I was even curious what other absurd rumors they would come up with about me, because my cousins regularly came and told me what Julia had said about me again. So for me, it became more of a joke and entertainment. Then 6 months ago, they got engaged and announced the wedding date. Soon my parents received an invitation, but I didn't. That suited me perfectly. I didn't expect an invitation to their wedding. Even if they had invited me, I wouldn't have gone, considering everything that happened between me and Julia, not to mention Lewis. The wedding took place 3 days ago, and for me it was an ordinary day. I didn't particularly think about what was happening there, but at some point, my phone literally started exploding with messages from relatives. Everyone was actively discussing some speech that Lewis and Julia gave at the wedding, and I was completely baffled. Then my parents called and said we needed to talk urgently. It was they who told me what happened, and at that moment I lost my temper. It turned out that they decided to seize the opportunity and gave a disgusting speech about me at the wedding, spreading all sorts of vile things to a large audience. They wanted to turn all the relatives against me, and could well have succeeded if I didn't have evidence that I could use against them. Julia and Lewis were cunning enough not to mention my name directly, but constantly referred to some former girlfriend who wasn't at the wedding. This clearly pointed to me because who else could they mean? They repeated all the rumors they had long tried to spread about me, as if I was a flighty gold digger who completely depended on Lewis and expected him to pay all expenses. He was supposedly forced to support me because I insisted on it being an ordinary student with no extra money and therefore demanding financial support from him. But this was also an absolute lie. I always insisted that we split expenses on dates equally and never expected him to pay for anything much less demanded it. But the most terrible thing they said about me was that I supposedly cheated on him, and according to them, it was the cheating that caused our breakup. At the wedding, they declared that they were very glad I was no longer in their lives, and that I wasn't at the celebration supposedly because they didn't want such a negative influence near them. They even gave the relatives an ultimatum from now on: family events invite either me or them. If I were present, they wouldn't be there. After that, people literally bombarded my phone with messages about this situation. But I learned the full picture of what happened only from my parents. And as I already said, I was incredibly angry. I thanked my parents for leaving the wedding immediately after the speech, not wanting to tolerate what vile things Julia resorted to. My parents also told me that my Aunt Linda was completely bewildered by what happened and immediately talked to them to clarify whether what Julia said in her speech was true, because it was completely unlike me, and she was right. I really didn't do anything like that, and her doubts about the truthfulness of her daughter's words were completely justified. In general, after I learned what exactly they said about me in the wedding speech, I decided not to hold back anymore and found old screenshots of correspondence that proved they were lying. I had to dig quite a bit, and it took a fair amount of time while I scrolled through the correspondence to the messages I needed. Fortunately, after a very long time, I was finally able to find the correspondence between me and my ex that I was looking for. These messages were sent around the time of our breakup, and back then he behaved especially toxically and cruelly. He said a bunch of vile things to me, like that he regretted ever starting to date me, that he wasted 3 years of his life, although he could have been with others because supposedly back then he had plenty of willing women, but now he would finally date other women. There was no mention of any betrayal, and I'm sure if I had really cheated on him, he wouldn't have let it go so easily. I scrolled through the correspondence further and found other messages where he behaved toxically toward me. After that, I posted all this online without explanations, without a signature, because these chats spoke for themselves, and so it happened. After publishing the screenshots, people started writing to me again and leaving comments under the post saying that they already knew that everything said about me was untrue. It seemed very strange to them that I could behave like that because they had known me since childhood, and I was not at all the person capable of such things. These screenshots clearly proved that everything was a lie, and the realization that my family was on my side, not theirs, was everything to me. Moreover, several people wrote to me who left the wedding precisely because of what was said about me. So although Julia and Lewis hoped they could turn people against me, their speech turned against them, and now there's absolutely no one on their side. Even my Aunt Linda Julia's mother turned away from them. They contacted me right after the wedding and literally begged me to forgive them because, as it turned out, after my Aunt Linda saw the screenshots I posted, she talked to them and said how deeply disappointed she was that Julia turned out to be so deceitful and tried to destroy my reputation just because I didn't want to continue relations with her after she got involved with my ex. By that time, most of the guests had already left the wedding because of all this drama. My Aunt Linda also told Julia that she was deeply upset by her behavior and expected more from her. So until she apologizes to me and I forgive her Aunt Linda doesn't want to have anything to do with them. And then Aunt Linda left the wedding despite Julia trying her hardest to dissuade her because she really depended heavily on her mother financially. That same night, they both called me and started tearfully apologizing because they understood they couldn't cope without Aunt Linda's support. She had been financially supporting Julia for quite a long time. Julia was going to close her business and take a break, which meant she would depend on her mother even more. But since Aunt Linda decided to abandon her, their plans came to an end, and Julia seriously worried about her future. So she reached out, wanting me to forgive her, delete the post, and talk to Aunt Linda. I was too angry because of everything that happened and refused blocking both of them. But since then, they have been desperately trying to contact me and persuade me to change my mind, and now I'm really bewildered. I don't know what to do. My Aunt Linda is a very decent person. We talked. She herself wrote to me the next day after the wedding to apologize for everything Julia did. I told her I didn't want my relationship with Julia to ruin my connection with her. Before, I didn't allow this, and I'm not going to now, so everything is fine between us. I know for sure that if I talk to her, I can settle everything for Julia. But if I'm honest, I don't feel I'm obligated to do this. She's an adult woman and should deal with the consequences of her actions herself. On the other hand, I feel awkward at the thought that I could help her and consciously don't do it. In general, I'm confused, so please help me. Am I acting badly by not wanting to talk to Aunt Linda and persuade her to forgive my cousin after she gave a disgusting speech at her wedding, slandering me? Well, I suggest right now to pause this video and write in the comments how you think the author should act should she still restore relations with Julia or do nothing. Personally, my opinion is that her doubts about the fact that she can help but consciously doesn't do it as she says are absolutely groundless, because Julia, at the very least, could simply do nothing too. But she did. She caused harm that is in this situation. Julia was only concerned with how to harm her friend better. So yes, I think there's no need to do anything here. Update 1. Hello. First of all, a huge thank you to everyone for the comments and support. Before moving to the update, I want to clarify one point. My parents were at the wedding, as were many other family members, because they belong to the older generation. They didn't know anything about the rumors that were being spread about me. Louis and Julia said all this mostly to our cousins' relatives of our age. They didn't involve the older ones in this. So my parents had absolutely no idea what was being said about me, and went to the wedding solely out of respect for my Aunt Linda. Although they guessed that something was wrong between me and Julia after she started dating this guy, I deliberately didn't tell them anything and didn't complain, just like I didn't to Aunt Linda, because I didn't want to drag them into such petty squabbles. I was above that, unlike Julia and Louis. In general, the point is that my parents weren't aware, and therefore went to the wedding. There's no need to blame or get angry at them. As soon as they and some other people from the older generation learned what was said about me at the wedding, they immediately left and no longer communicated with Julia and Louis. So, that's all clear, I hope. Now, to the point, a week has passed since the wedding. I blocked Louis and Julia so they couldn't contact me, but that didn't stop them. They continue to create new accounts on social media and send me letters, although I block them again and again. They are in despair, but I firmly decided that I'm not going to interfere or help them. I continue to maintain contact with Aunt Linda, and she clearly stated that she will start supporting her daughter again, only after I forgive her. But if I'm honest, I don't think I should forgive my cousin because for a whole year I stayed silent and allowed them to say nasty things about me simply because I didn't take them seriously. And they took it as a green light and crossed all boundaries. There's another point. If I'm honest, I don't think she deserves support from her mother at all. She's almost 30, and as I see it, at such an age, a person should already understand what they want from life. I just can't imagine how one can still be financially dependent on parents. It's not that she's uneducated or incapable. She's just always been too lazy to hold any job. Even when we had just graduated, she behaved the same way, and I hoped it would pass with age, but nothing changed. So, in essence, I'm even doing her a favor because the absence of financial help from Aunt Linda might finally teach her to work, or at least take something seriously. In any case, I've already decided everything for myself. I'm not going to help her. I discussed this with my parents to get rid of the feeling of guilt, and they said they fully support my decision. To forgive her or not is my choice alone. I'm not obligated to forgive her if I think she doesn't deserve it, even if I'm worried about her future. Besides, Lewis still has a decent job, and he can perfectly support both of them if they really want to live without help from my Aunt Linda. In the end, I talked with my parents, with friends, and with you here, and the majority thinks I have no reason to feel guilty, and honestly, it made me feel much lighter. But I still deleted that post with the screenshots of the correspondence because I saw no point in keeping it up. The whole family already knew what happened, and I didn't want it to remain on my profile because many other people are subscribed to me, and it would be hard to explain all this to them. So it was easier to just remove it. Now I'm trying to focus on myself and let go of all the anger and guilt that has accumulated in me these last days. I've returned to meditations trying to distract myself and go through all this in the calmest state possible. I really hope that Julia and Lewis will finally start dealing with their own lives instead of building them around me and turning me into the reason why they even get up in the morning as it has been until now. I think it will be better for all of us. Update 2. Hello. A month has passed since the wedding, and as far as I know, Lewis and Julia have taken up their old ways again. My Aunt Linda still doesn't talk to them because I haven't forgiven them. And at this stage, I'm not obligated to either, because I perfectly understand their apologies were not sincere. They apologized only for the sake of money from Aunt Linda. They didn't feel sorry, they just wanted financial support. A couple of days after unsuccessful attempts to convince me to forgive them and talk to Aunt Linda, they gave up when they realized I wasn't responding. And then they started spreading rumors about me again, but this time particularly inventively. It turns out they're now telling everyone that I'm deliberately trying to destroy their relationship with Aunt Linda because I want to take all the inheritance for myself. This makes absolutely no sense, complete absurdity, as if I'm capable of such a thing. My parents are doing fine with money. Even talking about this is laughable. I myself have a good job and provide for myself. I don't even think about any inheritance because at this rate, with God's help, I won't have to depend on anyone financially. Maybe they need money, so they have such thoughts. In general, they now tell this everywhere when they encounter someone from the family. And this happens often. We all live in our city, and they live near several of our relatives. People are starting to avoid them like the plague, but they still find a way to talk about me. I don't understand at all why they are so fixated on me. For a whole month, I've done nothing, just ignored them, and they still can't let go of what happened. In general, last week, all this finally got to me, and I told Aunt Linda about everything. She said that now, even if they apologize, she's not going to resume contact with them. She even told Julia this directly and blocked her again. Now they are angrier at me than ever before. I know this because they created another email account and sent me a very angry message. This is now the only way they can contact me. They wrote that I will pay for all this. Well, yes, scary, downright terrifying. I understand that their heads are spinning right now, and although I'm not really scared, all this, to put it mildly, is irritating. I responded to them that if they try to pull anything against me, I will immediately call the police and send them to jail without a drop of doubt. So let them think about what they're doing. I hope this cools them down, and if not, well, I have an excellent security system at home. Update 3. And so 4 days ago, I received a letter from Louis and Julia, in which they wrote that I would have to answer for everything I did. I warned them again that if they try to do anything to me, I will immediately report them to the police. But this didn't stop them, and they committed the most idiotic thing they could. Last night they tried to break into my house. Julia had been to my house many times and perfectly knows that I have a very advanced security system installed. So as soon as they even tried to open the door, the system immediately notified me. I don't understand at all why they decided that my door could be open in the middle of the night. I immediately called the police and reported that someone was trying to break into my house. I had a feeling that it could be Julia and Louis, but just in case, I didn't take risks. The police arrived in about 15 minutes, and to their misfortune, they were dressed like real burglars. They were detained not far from my house when they were trying to escape. They came on bicycles. They tried to convince the police that they knew me personally and weren't going to steal anything, just wanted to break in and talk to me, maybe scare me a little. I don't understand at all why they admitted this, as if it makes their behavior more acceptable from a legal standpoint. As soon as they put handcuffs on Julia, she immediately burst into tears and began begging me not to press charges against her. But I no longer had a drop of sympathy for her. You can't keep screwing up and at the same time expect to be forgiven. Louis looked at me with pure hatred, but I didn't care at all. I was already used to it. After that, I just went to sleep. I had work early in the morning. And in the morning, I told Aunt Linda and my parents about everything. They said they were already aware. Julia used her phone call to call Aunt Linda and ask her to get her out of the station, but Aunt Linda didn't even go to visit her. So now nobody knows what will happen next. I'm definitely going to file a report because I want to get a restraining order. They obviously have lost their minds, and I no longer want to have anything to do with them. Well, that's all. There are no more updates, unfortunately. In this story, only one small question slightly concerns me. What do you think, is Julia's mother really acting correctly by cutting off all relations with her like this? I've already expressed my position on such mothers many times in other videos. For me, it's somehow not entirely clear. No matter what your child is like, why act like that? I mean, not giving money is understandable. Not bailing them out of jail is fine, but completely not communicating. To me, it's somewhat strange, although at the same time, I absolutely understand the motives of such mothers. Write your opinion in the comments. Let's discuss this topic once again. Thank you for watching this video to the end. Watch our previous videos, which you will see right here. Be sure to subscribe to our channel to listen to similar stories in the future, and good luck to you.